The trouble started the moment the stagecoach wheels hit the dusty outskirts of Laramie, kicking up Wyoming dirt that clung to Raina Morrow's worn boots and frayed skirt. She held her sewing bag tight against her chest, the same way her mother held a Bible during storms. At 23, Raina had learned that life didn't hand out miracles. You stitched them together yourself, thread by thread, and prayed the seams held. But she never expected the job waiting for her to look like danger wearing a ribbon. Mrs. Henderson had told her she'd be sewing special garments at the Bradshaw Ranch. Raina imagined a quiet kitchen, maybe a nervous bride-to-be needing last-minute adjustments. She never imagined riding straight into a celebration big enough to make half the Wyoming territory blink. When the wagon crested the final rise, Raina's breath caught in her throat. The Bradshaw Ranch looked nothing like the dusty place she'd pictured. Banners in deep burgundy and cream hung from every rafter like flags of royalty. 3 long tables groaned under piles of roasted venison, fresh pies, golden cornbread, and bottles of whiskey she'd only ever seen behind the mercantile glass. $12 a bottle, more than her mother earned in 2 months. Fiddlers tuned their instruments by the barn. Ladies in silk dresses swished across the yard, their gloves spotless despite the dirt. Men in tailored vests smoked cigars that cost a day's wages. Boots polished, hats expensive, smiles sharp. And Raina, in her patched cotton dress and second-hand hat, felt like a stain on white linen. She climbed down from the wagon slowly, wishing she could vanish into the dust. A woman in peacock blue silk nudged her companion. "Who invited the help?" Heat crawled up Raina's neck. She clutched her sewing bag tighter. Maybe Mrs. Henderson had sent her to the wrong ranch. Maybe she should turn around, march back to town, and pretend this whole embarrassing mistake never happened. But before she could move, the crowd shifted. Every head turned toward the porch. There he was, Braden Bradshaw. Even Raina, who knew more about buttons than men, had heard of him. 31 years old, owner of 40,000 acres. Cattle herds so large they looked like moving shadows from hilltops. Water rights that half the region wished they owned. Ranch hands who swore he could break a wild horse with a glance. And now, standing in the center of this grand celebration, he looked like a man being forced to swallow something bitter. His mother, Ellie Bradshaw, tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in stiff black silk, hovered at his elbow like a storm cloud. Her attention flicked toward a blonde woman in a rose-colored gown waiting near the refreshments. Alia Randolph. Raina recognized the name instantly. The Randolphs owned more wheat than some small towns had people. Alia had Boston schooling, perfect posture, and money old enough to smell like leather-bound books and silver spoons. She was perfect for a man like Braden Bradshaw. Except Braden looked like he'd rather be facing down an angry bull. Raina understood that feeling. This whole place made her want to run for the hills. She took a small step back, straight into trouble. A red-faced man in a fancy suit stumbled into her path. His breath reeked of whiskey, his eyes unfocused as he glared at her sewing bag. "You there!" he barked loudly enough to hush half the yard. "Fetch me some whiskey." The imported kind, not the cheap trash. Raina froze. "Sir, I'm not." "Don't argue. Do your job." Laughter rippled through the nearest guests. Raina stared at the ground, cheeks burning hot enough to boil water. She stepped back. Her heel caught on a divot in the dirt. She stumbled. Strong hands caught her shoulders. Warm, steady, protective. Raina gasped and looked up. Braden Bradshaw stood inches away, storm-colored eyes locked on hers. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. Sun-darkened skin, a scar through one eyebrow, jaw shadowed with stubble, shoulders broad enough to block out half the yard. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. It felt like the world held its breath. Then something hardened in Braden's gaze, a decision forming right there in his eyes. He bent his head, his mouth brushing close to her ear, his voice low and dangerous. "Darlin', I need you to pretend something for me. Raina blinked. Pretend what? He slid one hand down her arm, slowly, deliberately, until his fingers intertwined with hers. Pretend to be my wife. The words hit her like a runaway horse. Before she could protest, Brayden lifted their joined hands high enough for everyone to see and turned to the crowd. This here is my wife, he said loudly, his voice cutting through the silence like a brand on cold skin, and I ain't courtin' anyone else. The world stopped. Alia's face drained of color. Mrs. Bradshaw gripped the porch railing like she might faint or kill someone, maybe both. Gasps rippled around them. The drunk man staggered backward. Raina's entire body went rigid. Wife? Wife? Brayden didn't give her time to process anything. He slid his arm around her waist, pulling her gently but firmly against his side, his grip warm, certain, protective. To everyone watching, they now looked exactly like what he claimed, husband and wife. What are you doing? Raina whispered, her heart racing. Saving myself, Brayden murmured. And saving you. How is pretending I'm your wife saving me? Because if I hadn't stepped in, he said quietly, eyes locked on the crowd, this party would have eaten you alive. Raina swallowed hard. Brayden squeezed her waist, steadying, grounding. Just follow my lead, he whispered. Please. Raina didn't know why, but she nodded. Maybe it was the desperation in his voice. Maybe it was the way his hand trembled, just barely. Maybe it was because saying no would have humiliated them both even worse. Whatever the reason, she stayed by his side as the celebration erupted around them, chaos swirling like dust in a stampede. And that was the moment everything, every stitch of her life, began to unravel. The storm waiting for them inside the Bradshaw ranch house was not made of wind or rain. It was made of people, shocked people, angry people, curious people, all of them whispering. Brayden kept his arm around Raina's waist as he guided her through the yard, past the stunned guests who stared as if witnessing a cattle stampede in slow motion. Smile, he murmured without moving his lips. I can't. You can, he insisted, voice low but steady. Just trust me. Trust. A dangerous word. But Raina lifted her chin, forcing something like a smile onto her face, as they approached Ellie Bradshaw. The older woman marched forward like a general preparing for war. Brayden Samuel Bradshaw, her voice was sharp enough to split rail ties. Explain yourself. Now. Brayden didn't flinch. Mama, this is my wife, Raina Morrow. The entire porch went silent again. Raina wished the ground would open and swallow her whole. Ellie's eyes swept over her from boots to hairpins. Your wife? And when, exactly, were you planning to inform your own mother that you'd taken vows? 3 weeks ago in Laramie, Brayden replied smoothly. Small ceremony. Didn't want to fuss. Raina choked on air. 3 weeks ago? But Ellie wasn't done. Morrow, she repeated slowly, you're Macy Morrow's daughter. The seamstress. Raina nodded, her voice small. Yes, ma'am. Ellie's lips thinned. And you expect me to believe that my son, the most eligible bachelor in 3 territories, married a girl he barely knows in a secret ceremony no one witnessed? Raina opened her mouth to explain, to confess, to say anything that would stop this lie from growing. Brayden's hand tightened at her waist. A warning. A plea. She is my wife, he said firmly. And I'll thank everyone to treat her with respect. Before Ellie could answer, Alia Randolph swept forward, her gown shimmering in the afternoon sun. Her expression was sweet, but her eyes were sharp enough to slice leather. Brayden, darling, she said with a brittle smile, this is quite unexpected. Raina braced herself. But I suppose, Alia added, everyone enjoys a good story, especially one as dramatic as yours. Quote, before Brayden could respond, The fiddlers struck up a tune. Guests, sensing the tension, pretended to return to their conversations, though their eyes stayed glued to the couple in the center. "We need to dance," Braden murmured. "What?" Raina squeaked. "People are watching. If we look natural, they'll believe us. Come on." He guided her onto the makeshift dance area. Raina had danced only twice in her life, both times stepping on toes. But Braden's hand slid into hers, his other settling on her waist. He moved with practiced ease, leading her through slow circles. "You're trembling," he whispered. "I'm terrified." "I know, but you're doing just fine." His breath brushed her cheek. His voice steadied her more than it should have. "Why did you do this?" she whispered. "I needed a way out," he answered without hesitation. "And I saw a woman who needed saving as badly as I did." "So you just claimed me?" He gave a sigh that was almost a laugh. "That wasn't the plan." "What was the plan?" "Escape. Somehow. Anyhow." Raina almost laughed. "Terrible plan." "Worked, didn't it?" Quote. She shook her head, unable to decide if she wanted to strangle him or faint. They danced until the eyes watching them softened with suspicion turned to reluctant acceptance. When the music ended, Braden didn't immediately release her. For a moment their faces were inches apart, his gray-blue eyes softened, something warm flickering through them. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should introduce you around." "No," she whispered. "No, I can't." "You can," he said again. "I'll be right beside you." And he was. For the next hour, he played the devoted husband flawlessly, introducing her to ranch hands, business partners, and curious townsfolk. His voice remained calm, steady, reassuring. His hand never left her waist. He made her feel safe, seen, protected. It was dizzying. Finally, as the sun dipped low and guests trickled away, Braden walked her toward the waiting wagon. He hesitated before speaking. "I know today was unexpected." "That's one word," she said weakly. "I promise I'll make things right." "How?" she asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his vest pocket and pressed a small card into her hand. "Come to the ranch tomorrow." Mid-morning, his voice lowered. "We'll talk properly then." "About what?" He gave her a small, maddening half-smile. "About how to untell a whole county that we're married." Or what?" "Or maybe," he said slowly, "we figure out a different solution." Before she could ask what that meant, he tipped his hat and helped her onto the wagon. His hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. She felt that touch all the way back to town. That night, Raina lay awake in her small boarding house room, staring at the ceiling. Her mother's quiet breathing came from the next room. The walls were thin. The world was smaller here, predictable, familiar. But her life wasn't familiar anymore. Not after a rich cowboy had grabbed her hand in front of 100 people and declared her his wife. Not after he'd held her like she mattered. Not after he'd told her to come back tomorrow. Morning came too soon. Raina, dressed in her best patched blouse and skirt, pinned her hair neatly, and walked 10 miles toward a future she didn't understand. The Bradshaw Ranch looked different in daylight, less like a stage, more like a working kingdom. Braden opened the front door himself. His sleeves were rolled, his vest unbuttoned, his hair still damp from washing. He looked nothing like the polished man from yesterday. "Miss Morrow," he said with a nod. "Come on in. We've got a lot to discuss." Her heart pounded, because she knew, deep in her bones, that whatever happened next would change her life forever. Braden led Raina into a small study lined with ledgers, maps, and books worn from real use. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm gold across the wood floor. He motioned for her to sit, then stood near the desk with his arms crossed, as if preparing for battle. "First," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Raina blinked. "For what part? The pretending? The wife announcement? The near riot?" A corner of his mouth lifted. "All of it." Despite herself, she almost smiled. Then he slid a folded paper across the desk toward her. "Read it." Raina unfolded it slowly, her breath caught. A contract. A real one. In neat, firm handwriting. In exchange for acting as Braden Bradshaw's wife in public for 1 year, he will pay Raina's mother's full $75 debt. Provide Raina with a fully stocked seamstress shop in town with a year's rent paid. Provide Raina her own living quarters at the ranch. Pay $25 each month. Extend protection and support for her mother. Require no intimacy of any kind. But then her eyes caught on the line. If either party violates this rule, the agreement ends immediately. Raina looked up sharply. "Why this?" Quote. Braden leaned against the desk, jaw tight. "Because feelings complicate everything. They ruin things. I've lived that." His voice was low, guarded, hurt lived underneath it. She swallowed. "So you need a pretend wife." "I need space," he corrected. "Peace. Freedom from my mother's matchmaking, from business deals disguised as marriages, from being pushed into a life I don't want." "And me?" she asked softly. "You get freedom too," he said. "A way out of debt, a real future, your own shop, safety for your mother, a chance to start fresh." Raina's heart pounded. It was too much, too generous, too impossible. "So this is business," she whispered. "Yes." "And after a year?" "We separate quietly," he said. "No drama. You keep everything. I go back to being stubborn and single." He was trying so hard to sound detached, but his eyes looked exhausted, lonely, frayed. He thought this would protect him. He thought this would protect her. Instead, it felt like a cage with both of them inside. But Raina thought of her mother coughing in the night, the debt she could never repay, the sewing jobs that barely kept them afloat. The years stretching ahead with no escape. This contract was madness. But it was also salvation. She picked up the pen. Braden watched her carefully, too carefully, as she signed her name. Then he signed beneath it. And just like that, with ink barely dry, Raina Morrow became, in the eyes of the entire Wyoming Territory, Mrs. Braden Bradshaw. Moving day came fast. Raina's belongings fit into 2 crates. Her mother's fit into 1. Life didn't leave luxury for women like them. But Braden honored every word of the contract. He paid the debt before noon. He placed her mother in a comfortable cottage near the ranch gardens. And he walked Raina to her new room, a sunlit chamber with a large bed, a writing desk, a wardrobe, lace curtains fluttering in warm breeze. "This is too much," she whispered. "It's adequate," he said, almost gruff. "You deserve comfort." When he stepped from the doorway, a strange emptiness followed him out. That night they shared dinner with ranch hands. Braden made sure she was welcomed, that she had a seat beside him, that no one treated her like anything less than the ranch's mistress. But when night deepened and lamplight glowed soft and warm, they walked together toward the stairs and paused. "Good night, Raina," he said quietly. "Good night, Braden." He walked one direction, she walked the other. Separate wings, separate rooms, separate hearts. That didn't stay separate for long. Weeks passed. Life found rhythm. Raina sewed in her shop, customers lining up before she even unlocked the door. Her hands were steadier than her heart. Braden visited town often, too often, claiming business errands, though his eyes always drifted toward her shop window. And each evening, as they rode back to the ranch in the carriage, conversation grew warmer, softer, closer. She learned he liked his coffee strong, hated storms, trusted horses more than people, talked to cattle when he thought no one was listening. He learned she hummed when she sewed, feared wolves at night, saved every spare coin, loved the smell of pine after rain. Little things. Dangerous things. Things that built something too real. Then came the night the storm hit. The sky split open, lightning cracking like rifle shots. Rain crashed against the house in heavy waves. Raina worked in the parlor, measuring fabric, trying to ignore the storm, until the front door burst open. Braden stood there, soaked head to boots, shirt clinging to every line of muscle, hair dripping water down his jaw. He looked wild, untamed, absolutely beautiful. Raina froze. "Storm hit faster than I thought," he said, shaking off water. "Had to secure the cattle." "He'll get sick," she whispered. He stepped closer to the fire, steam rising from his clothes. "You're worried about me," he teased softly. "You're dripping on the floor." "And you're blushing," he replied. "Not teasing now." Lightning flashed. Thunder followed. Raina jumped. Braden's hand caught her elbow, steadying her. They were too close. Too warm. Too aware. His eyes dropped to her mouth, just for a moment, just long enough to break something inside her. He stepped back abruptly. "I should change." "Yes," she breathed. But the air between them felt charged, more dangerous than any lightning. Something had shifted. Something neither of them could undo. Everything fell apart 3 nights later. Arguments weren't supposed to happen. Feelings weren't supposed to grow. Kisses weren't supposed to happen. But they did. And when Raina confessed she'd broken the contract, broken the rule about feelings, Braden panicked, pushed her away, sent her back to town with empty hands and a cracked heart. She cried for days. He didn't sleep for 3, until he finally realized what his mother had known all along. He wasn't protecting himself. He was running from the only woman he had ever truly loved. He rode into town at sunrise, dust rising behind him, breath sharp with regret. He walked into her shop, hat in hand, heart in his throat. "Raina," he whispered, voice breaking, "I'm sorry." She looked up slowly. He stepped closer. "I was wrong. I was scared. I let an old hurt decide our future. But I love you. I love you more than this land, more than my pride, more than anything I've ever known." Tears filled her eyes. "You hurt me," she whispered. "I know, and I'll spend every day making it right if you'll let me." Silence. Then she stepped into him, resting her forehead against his. "I love you too." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like something sacred, something irreplaceable. And this time, nothing, not contracts, not fear, not stubborn hearts, could stand between them. They married for real 3 weeks later. No secrets. No lies. No conditions. Just love. A year later, the Bradshaw Ranch had a new sign outside the main house. Braden and Raina Bradshaw. A partnership meant to last. And every morning, Braden kissed his wife. A real kiss, not a pretend one, before heading out to the pastures. Because in the end, the only rule that ever mattered between them was simple. Choose each other, every day, for the rest of their lives.